Direct from the web, it's Billy Masters Live. And now, please welcome your host, Billy Masters.
Hold on. Welcome to the show. Oh, yes. Welcome to Billy Masters Live. Of course, I am your host, Billy Masters. Who else, of course, would be hosting this show? And today is Thursday, March 21st. Is that right? I guess it is. Yeah, it's March 21st. This is week, I don't know, 8, 9, 10. You know, all the weeks have kind of blended together. And we want to thank you for being with us today. We're here every week on Tuesday and Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. And this is a drama-free show, assuming that you can hear and you can see us. And so, as always, I'm going to open with a little anecdote from the past. This is maybe 3 years, 4 years ago. One of the compliments I've been getting since I started doing this show was that people feel it's like the old Dick Cavett show, the long form interview where you're really eavesdropping on people having a conversation, and it's not dictated by commercials or executives or anything. God knows I cannot be dictated to, as both of my guests know. And about 5 years ago at the Golden Globes, Dick Cavett was there, maybe 4. And we found ourselves like trying to get across a room and right in very close quarters. And he brushed against me and kind of leaned into me. I swear, Gloria, don't get upset by this, but this is like what happened. And my hand brushed against Dick Cavett's penis. I know. I'm thank God he didn't sue. He actually said to me, because he pushed into me and said, "Excuse me." And I said, "Well, no problem." But I said, "Since we apparently know each other, can we take a photo?" And so we actually took a photo, me and Dick Cavett. He looks a little more surprised. I, of course, just another penis in the wind. Okay, my first guest is a boss, one of my bosses, and she is a newswoman, journalist from Boston. She's a contributor to NECN, WB's NBC's local affiliate here. She is also on NPR. She's everywhere, and she also owns Bay Windows and the South End News. And we're just going to talk briefly about what's happening here in the Boston area with things opening up, because we are one of those states that's slowly opening up. Here she is, Miss Sue O'Connell.
Hey, Billy, how are you? Hi, a very high death rate, yet we're opening up anyway. What the heck, right? You know,
so
6,000 people die in 2 months, but let's open. We're not opening as quickly as some other states are, but I got my mug too. I would offer, yes, that maybe we should be opening a little bit slower, but no one asked me except you. So there you go.
Well, here's my question. You know, I'm in physical therapy. I had surgery, rotator cuff surgery. Gloria and I were just talking on March 12th. So I was planning on quarantining and sheltering at home anyway. Then I had to find a physical therapist. Most physical therapy places were closed. So I was lucky enough to find one not too far from my parents. And I've been there. And every 2 weeks when they extend, we'll revisit this in 2 more weeks. We'll revisit this in 2 more weeks. I had said, I don't know, I think about the beginning of May, they are going to open up before Memorial Day because they're worried if they don't, there would be a revolt.
Well, look, there's a couple of challenges here. There's no federal leadership here. Okay, obviously. So every state, I mean, on the good news side, it's a good thing that we're set up the way we are, that the governors have authority to do things, because nobody from Washington, D.C. and the White House is giving anybody any kind of real science, data-based advice. So the governors are on their own and they're making the best decisions that they can. I totally support that. You know, most of the governors are doing that. No federal guidance is happening. Secondly, what about the workers? You know, I'm not so worried about me, and I'm not worried about a whole bunch of people. I'm working from home. I have a job. You know, I can get to the grocery store. But there are people. They showed a picture on NBC 10 this week. We had a picture of folks on our train, on the MBTA, our train system, our transit system, packed in, no social distancing, and those are people going to work. So who is protecting the workers as we go back out in? And on the other hand, if I have three hands, I mean, good thing I didn't bump into you at the Golden Globes, because that's what would happen. But I mean, we can't enforce this, right? There's no real way that we're going to send like National Guard folks out into the streets as we emerge from it was March and January, the weather here, March and February, March and and April, and it was March all May.
And now it's August.
To get out. Now it's August, right? Now we're dying to get out, and it's going to be hard to contain people, you know, and say you have to stay in. So there's no real easy answer here, but I feel for the businesses. You know, I own a small business. I'm a small business owner. I
got a check beginning of the week, so thank you.
You're well, I knew I was going to be on. I didn't want to have you ask me when the paycheck was.
It was coming. The January check, but it was a check.
It's still a paycheck. It's a paycheck. So
on the other hand, where am I going? Where am I spending money? And I think, you know, that brings up, you know, you brought up several good points. One of the points being is that those people on those subways, a lot of them are working in the healthcare industry. Yes. So they are now going to come in contact with patients. Now, I just told you about my surgery. I have an appointment with my orthopedic surgeon. I was supposed to have a visit, I think 6 weeks out from surgery to see how I was healing. We're now 9 or 10 weeks out. It has been rescheduled 3 times. We can't do a telemed because he actually needs to lift it.
Right.
And so they just called this morning to cancel again. I can be frustrated and angry, but I get it. So,
right, but Billy, here's the other thing, right? Just as well as we're casting blame, you and I both have lived through the HIV/AIDS pandemic. Yeah. We knew that, you know, had the White House, had the federal government responded 5 years earlier than they did, that a whole, you know, thousands, millions of lives,
a generation would have been live.
You know, because they would have reacted. People would have died in the beginning, sadly, but they would have caught up. You know, we are still behind the 8 ball here in the United States regarding testing. And until the federal government can give us reliable testing and processing of the testing and get the testing back so that you can go get your shoulder checked, so that, you know, I can go get my x-ray that I need done so we can get back to the business of being healthy. And that's, you know, we're behind. We're not New Zealand. We should be New Zealand. I got my mask ready to go. You know, I was supposed to be Women's Week and Memorial Day,
get too close.
Provincetown, right?
Well, what I'm worried about is, as you pointed out on your third hand, the enforcing of this, because we've seen when they started opening beaches, say in California or Florida, people were not observing the social distancing. They were not wearing masks, and they said, if you don't, we are going to start giving tickets. Now, the minute that starts, I think there will be pandemonium. And actually, it's kind of a good point to bring Gloria in on, because it was just announced this week that West Hollywood is making masks in the city mandatory. And there are many people who are complaining, saying this is infringing on civil rights. If I'm walking down the street and no one's around me, why do I need to wear a mask? And the reason being given is that store owners are saying people either don't put the mask on when they go in the store, or they have it around their neck and they have to tell them. So if you make a blanket statement, everyone has to wear a mask, then everybody is safe.
It doesn't put it on the store. It doesn't put it on the store clerks, you know, who are not making $1 billion a year to have to yell at Karen who doesn't want to wear a mask. I mean, that's not fair.
Or the security guard that goes up to someone at the dollar store and ends up dead.
Right.
So let me, you know, I wasn't going to bring her in quite so soon, but Gloria, let's our guest. All right. I just have to say something about it before I bring her in. First off, Gloria Allred, to me, was always one of those figures. So I'm going to take you out for a second.
Okay.
I'll bring you back. Gloria Allred, to me, was one of those people who I saw on TV since, for me, I think early 80s. And I always thought to myself, why is this person, not woman, not man, person, the smartest person in the room? And number two, why is everyone so afraid of her? And I actually I've met Gloria many times. First time I met her was at something I was hosting, and we were sitting at the same table. I've told this story before. We were sitting at the same table. She didn't know who I was. I knew who she was. I got up. This is us at this. I don't remember where we were. There's a picture of us. So I was emceeing something, maybe an auction or something. And I said some things on stage that I probably shouldn't. And, as I often do. And I came back and Gloria was laughing and said I did such a great job and handed me her card and said, hold on to this. I have a feeling you'll need it someday. And I have. Then a couple of years later, she came to LA Pride. She's a strong advocate of the gay rights and an ally of our community. She was backstage, which I was hosting, and we took a quick picture together. And then someone said to me, why don't you two dance? And for whatever reason, I dipped her. So Gloria Allred let me dip her. That maybe wasn't a good idea. Okay, before we bring her on, this interview is being done with no restrictions, no stipulations. Everybody said to me, well, what's going to happen? You should be afraid. Some people said she should be afraid. She's a fearless person, and so am I. She's also, again, going to be the smartest person in the room. Welcome, Gloria Allred.
Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction, Billy, and also for bringing back the terrific memories of when we were together. And I look forward to the day when perhaps you'll be able to and want to dip me again.
Anytime, Glow, anytime. There's a documentary about you on Netflix, yes, which I think everybody should see. And I had to make some notes because I was really struck by 90% of what other people said about you. They were talking about how you were humorless, how you are. People said horrible things. 90% of them, I think, based on the fact that you're smart and that you're a woman. I don't hear them calling Alan Dershowitz an ambulance chasing harpy, but I would hear things like that about you, and they all seem very intimidated by you. Is that where that comes from, those attacks?
Well, obviously there is a double standard, a sex discriminatory double standard in terms of the reaction of some people to an assertive female attorney as opposed to an assertive male attorney.
Really?
But I've been practicing for more than 44 years now. We are the leading women's rights law firm in the United States. We have fought for decades for gay and lesbian, transgender rights, have many famous cases, published opinions in the courts in which we have won rights for gay and lesbian minorities. And we've won hundreds of millions of dollars for victims that we have represented. And we fight against the rich and the powerful and the famous big business, government, other institutions for the individual, and sometimes for more than one individual.
Yeah, I also was struck. You said
successful. So people are often intimidated by the fact that I am going to be a strong advocate for my client. You see that in the Netflix documentary, Seeing Allred, which is, by the way, I'm happy to say, still streaming on Netflix. I asked them, how long is it going to be streaming? And they said, forever. It's Netflix. And they're getting a great reaction to it. Still, it was an official selection. We're wonderfully excited to be an official selection of the Sundance Film Festival a couple of years ago. Out of 2,000 documentaries, they only chose, I think, 16, like that, to be official selection. So we're just thrilled, and I'm just thrilled with the reaction because it's been very empowering. Many people have written to me and said after watching it, they feel, instead of being depressed as they were about their life, they feel extremely empowered and fired up and wanting to take action to fight against injustice, and I'm just thrilled about that.
Well, I think that it's really impactful. I will say that the only thing I was afraid of after watching it, I'm not sure if I'd want to drive with you.
Okay, well, yeah, I think most people who know how I drive would prefer not to be in a car with me. So I can understand that. By the way, speaking of documentaries, and again, thank you for mentioning Seeing Allred. I'm in another one, much more briefly, which is going to air tomorrow night.
On FX, is it?
FX, and then on Saturday, I believe FX on Hulu. And that's the one on Jane Roe. You know, Roe v. Wade. Jane Roe was the plaintiff. Her real name was Norma McCorvey. In the landmark 1973 United States Supreme Court decision, Roe v. Wade, in which the Supreme Court of the United States found that a woman does have a right to privacy and liberty, and does have a right to legal, safe, available abortions, and that states may not criminalize them or restrict them, except they can restrict at certain stages of the pregnancy, the last 3 months. But even then, there have to be exceptions for the health and the life of the mother. So, point is that she makes a deathbed confession in this documentary that's going to be broadcast tomorrow night, about Jane Roe. And they'll see when she was pro-choice and asked me to help her and represent her, which I did, and then how she then went over and became anti-choice. And then now her deathbed confession is that she was really pro-choice all along, but worked with these religious organizations and the anti-choice because they paid her. They were supporting her, providing significant hundreds of thousands of dollars of financial support to her. So that is caused quite a bit of controversy and interest, and people, I hope, will tune into that as well.
You just touched on a point that I hadn't thought of talking to you about, but I have always felt that the pro-choice people have allowed what I often called anti-choice people to brand themselves as pro-life, which I think that branding has really helped the anti-choice movement, because everybody is pro-life. I don't know anyone who is anti-life. What you are is either pro-choice or against choice. And if you don't believe in choice, that's a slippery slope.
Well, absolutely. I agree with you. And I mean, they chose the name for themselves, pro-life, very carefully. I call them anti-choice. I call them the side that is in favor of mandatory motherhood and compulsory pregnancy. And apparently there are some in the anti-choice movement that thinks a fertilized egg should have more rights than an adult woman. I would disagree with them. And anyway, the real issue is not abortion or no abortion, because there will be abortions even when it was a crime to have an abortion, for a doctor to provide them. I'm one of those people
which I didn't know until the documentary.
Before Roe v. Wade, who did have an abortion prior to the Supreme Court decision, Roe v. Wade. And so then I had to have a back alley abortion and almost died.
And a horrific experience. Will you tell me what the nurse said to you when you were recovering?
Yeah, because what happened was we could only go to the hospital, not to get an abortion, but essentially if we were hemorrhaging and bleeding to death after the illegal abortion. Again, not a crime for me to have it, but a crime for a licensed care provider to provide it. And so then when I was taken by ambulance to the hospital, and then I was lying there with, I think it was 103 or 106 degree fever, I can't remember, but, and being packed in ice, and then, and almost died. The nurse came over and said, I hope this teaches you a lesson. So I always remembered that, and I thought, well, what is the lesson? And the lesson is, from my point of view, that every woman, and I might add teenager, should be entitled to legal, safe, available, affordable abortions, not unsafe, illegal abortions, because so many women of my generation were maimed or almost died from illegal abortions. Some did die.
Some couldn't have children afterwards.
Or couldn't have children, exactly right, Billy. And so we say, in a way, it was our women's Vietnam, because we lost so many people, so many women in that. And so I am a dedicated pro-choice advocate. And
Good for you.
I actually even testified about it before the United States Senate with Jane Roe,
Wow.
which I didn't even remember, but I did that. And I found that somebody found that transcript for me the other day with Senator Kennedy calling on me.
Wow.
So, yes, I have been for all these years, in the same way that, we've just fought for civil rights for so many years. Like, let's go back, for example, to the Gay and Lesbian Pride Parade. I have never missed a year of that.
No, you have not.
I've been in that parade every year for more than 40 years.
Yes, you have.
And from the time it was a very small parade in the 1970s, I think, to now. And I was signed up, of course, for this year's parade, but
I know you were.
We're not going to be able to hold it in West Hollywood because of COVID-19, but they're going to do something. They haven't said what and yet. So I don't know, maybe they'll have a virtual, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think I'm going to do a virtual show. But what I found was you made a statement in the documentary, not just female rights, all rights. And again, I think that's what it's about. It's about equality across the board for the rich and the poor, men, women, adults, children, gay, straight. I don't think it matters to you.
It doesn't. And we have now, for example, we do a lot of sexual harassment cases and have for decades. My partner, some of my partners, we just had a case that we tried in December 2019. And that happened to be a woman who was a victim of sexual harassment. And we also represented men who were sexually harassed by other men. But in that case, Mahim Khan versus Alki David, a billionaire, we won a verdict of $58,250,000 for our client, Ms. Khan, who was, we allege, sexually harassed by Mr. David. The jury returned that verdict against him, and he just asked for a new trial. The court denied it. So we have that judgment against him. And a couple months before that, we won $5 million for another woman against him, Lauren Reeves, who was very brave to go through the trial. And so, yes, we'll fight. But we had a famous case many years ago, a man being sexually harassed by another man. We won, I believe, in excess of $5 million. That was decades ago, so it was really worth a lot more.
Of course.
A verdict there. We've had every combination you can think of. A man being sexually harassed by his woman boss.
Wow.
And we allege retaliated against because he was sexually, he believed he was sexually harassed. The jury found he was not sexually harassed, but he was retaliated against. When he made that complaint, came back with more than $16 million verdict against Vaughn's grocery store. That was decades ago. Again, we've had women who were sexually harassed by other women.
Of course.
We have had, every combination you can think of. But the point is, the law is there to protect victims of sexual harassment in employment. And it doesn't matter whether the victim is a male or a female. Sexual harassment is the denial of equal employment opportunity. It interferes with it. And that's why it's against the law. And the good news is, the bad news is there's still a lot of sexual harassment. The good news is the victims are fighting back and winning and making the sexual harassers and other predators accountable. The wrongdoer, the harasser, has to pay the cost of the wrong, not the victim, which is the way it should be.
Well, let's talk about, so we've talked about different rights people have. And so I'm going to bring Sue back in. Sue O'Connell, meet Gloria Allred.
Gloria, good to meet you.
You too, Sue.
We were talking before here about West Hollywood. Now, this this is a big deal on Facebook. The idea that West Hollywood is making masks mandatory everywhere. Now, I know obviously the legality you can't necessarily dissect, but in terms of people's rights, is this an overstepping of the rights?
Well, again, Billy,
yeah, go ahead.
well, I just want to remind you about the early HIV/AIDS days when they wanted to shut the bathhouses. Gloria, I'm sure you remember this as well, and that people were like, "Oh no, you're infringing on our rights. You're picking on us because we're gay and we're using a bathhouse," even though there were a lot of HIV cases coming out of the bathhouses. We've come a long way since then, since we're doing contact tracing and all of that carefully, but. I said to someone the other day on Facebook, McDonald's can tell you no shirt, no service. And I know that the government is not McDonald's, that it's a company, but at the same time, public health sometimes, there are things that the government's allowed to do in order to protect the public.
Gloria?
Piggyback on that point, which is so interesting. Because I was mentioning back in the 80s, I had a very famous case. I was doing a lot of cases of discrimination against individuals who had AIDS or were perceived to have AIDS or perceived to be HIV positive. And we had a very famous case called Paul Jasperson versus Jessica's Nail Salon. And Paul went in, made an appointment to have a pedicure. And they made the appointment. As he was leaving, he saw one of his clients, he was a hairstylist, and who said, why haven't I seen you for a while? He mentioned he'd been in the hospital, that he was HIV positive, but he's out now, everything's fine. And then he got a call canceling the appointment. We fought that case for 16 years. The nail salon alleged that they could do that, essentially for health reasons. They didn't have to give a pedicure. There, we had experts. It was not transmissible by giving a pedicure, and especially where a person could wear gloves and so forth.
You had this thing called science. You had science.
That science was the key.
Yeah.
We won that case. We continue with that case even after Paul Jasperson, may he rest in peace, passed away. We went up to the Court of Appeals. We won 2 precedences that businesses cannot discriminate against someone because they have AIDS or HIV positive. In addition, that even though the case was after he passed away, that injunction should still issue against the business to stop that practice. So really the difference is there is a scientific basis for saying someone should have to wear a mask. There was no scientific basis for saying that someone can't get a pedicure because they were perceived to be HIV positive. So that's what's about. We had cases against dentists who didn't want to perform dental services for someone with AIDS. We won those cases, and on and on.
Right.
So yes, we have to look at the science, Sue, as you mentioned. We have to be very careful that what's done is based on facts and science, not on fear and stereotypes and myths. The city of West Hollywood, as far as I'm concerned, has been a leader in so many ways.
Right.
So many cases. And I'm so happy to have worked with them on so many things. And I commend them for what they're doing and saying everybody must wear a mask. They should. It's for the protection of others. It's a small sacrifice against a major risk. And we have to be mindful and respectful of that risk and protecting our duty to protect others.
Billy, I point out to you that during the Obama years, a lot of the same people who are saying, no, you can't make me wear a mask, were also saying, wear a mask so Obama can't identify you, right? There was a whole militia idea that Obama was coming for you. So if you wore a mask, his drone wasn't going to be able to see you. And there are a lot of the same people behind this idea of saying you shouldn't wear a mask because of rights. So it's, it's all, a lot of this is political theater. In Massachusetts, 70% of the people surveyed by a recent WGBH Suffolk University poll were in support of wearing masks and staying home. So, it's a small percent. It's the same 30% who think that, the earth is the center and the sun goes around the earth, and that, we didn't land on the moon and the earth is flat.
Well, Gloria, you live by the beach, and you have seen that people have not been doing what they should on the beach. And there have been threats by Governor Newsom that they will be ticketed, they will be cited. Because again, the alternative is if you don't follow the rules, we'll close it up and you'll have to stay home. Do you see a time people will actually get tickets? And do you think court cases would happen over this?
Yeah, I think Governor Newsom is really working hard to protect the population of California. We were the early state to close, and I'm proud of that. And I'm actually looking at the beach right now. Outside of my window, nobody's on it right now, but I'm sure this weekend there'll be a lot of people on the beach.
Right.
I think everybody should take it as an opportunity to, enjoy the beautiful sunshine, enjoy the beach, but know that we can't, we're not going to escape this the COVID-19 by being foolish and just saying, I'm not going to wear a mask because, it can be in the air. We have to socially distance. We have to wear the mask. It's inconvenient, but we need to do it because as far as I'm concerned, it's not worth the risk.
Right.
You see all these horror stories. People have been, most people who end up in the hospital and are intubated pass away. Maybe 15% come out. And it's a horrendous experience. And why would you want to take the risk? It's a risk not for just people, for example, my age. The risk is great there are a lot of people in their 30s and 40s and 50s who are also, being hospitalized. Some have passed away. This is not a time to be reckless. It's a time.
Would you?
It's just polite. We talked about this last week, Billy. It's just polite. I mean, I don't understand. The whole idea of manners is to try and make other people feel comfortable. And if someone, whether or not you're fully bought in on the science or not, just wear a mask and be polite.
And let's talk about that for a minute.
Yes, go ahead.
Who is not being protective of others? The President of the United States.
Right.
President Trump, who doesn't wear a mask.
Ever.
Who's not, he might not, but so far he hasn't. Was he going into factories where he's talking to people who are not socially distant to him? Okay. And this is presenting a risk of harm to them. And also his administration, a lot of people are not wearing masks, even in the White House. It is not respectful of other members of the public. Is he doing it because he's trying to, do a macho thing or say to his base, we're back to normal, there's no risk, we don't have to worry about it? The virus is not political. The virus strikes Republicans and independents, Democrats, people who vote, people who don't vote. And so this is setting a really bad example. It's not respectful. It's rude, and it's dangerous. And yet the President of the United States, who people are looking to, should we do this, should we not only is spewing thousands and thousands of lies, which he's done in these last 3-some years, but now the photos of him not wearing a mask, talking to people near him in confined spaces, it's just sending the wrong message, and it's placing other people at risk. He's got doctors to take care of him at the White House. He's got anything he needs there. And yet he's willing to place other people at risk. And I don't think that's pointed out enough in the media.
Agreed.
It's not about protecting him. When he wears a mask, he's protecting other people from him. And
well, Sue and I brought that up 2 weeks ago, is that when you see someone not wearing a mask, even if they're not near you, what they are saying is, I don't care about anyone else. That is the subliminal message. But Gloria, just on a legal standpoint, if somebody did get a ticket or fined for not wearing a mask, would you take that person's case because you felt their rights were infringed upon, or would you not?
I would not.
Okay.
And ordinarily, I wouldn't say in advance if I'm taking somebody's case. But I do think that, this is public health, public safety, public welfare. And I think there's a basis for the rule. If I thought there was no basis for it, I would certainly take the case.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm a private attorney. I don't have to take cases that I think that is not a good fit for me or my law firm. And I'm not the best advocate for that case. Right. So they can find someone else to do that. And I know that apparently some of the churches are gearing up to sue. So I mean, really, we'll see what happens. It's an interesting legal issue, but I wouldn't want to risk the health of anybody just because I wanted, for whatever reason. They can still communicate, they can still pray, they can still be online with each other. Mm-hmm. But to sit next to people in a crowded church, I'm very concerned about that.
I had written to both of you. I've gotten a lot of feedback from people, especially when I announced, Gloria, that you'd be on this show, that people express to me that they feel helpless. And we've talked very often on this show about bygone eras where people took to the streets. And aside from the Women's March, which did get people out, the only time I see people willing to stand outside is to get the newest eye product. So why don't people take to the streets? Why aren't there more protests and outrage? Is it that they feel helpless, or is it apathy? Gloria, let me start with you.
I will respectfully differ with you, Billy.
Okay, please.
So, for example, in the last week or so, we have seen protests, but they've been protests against Trump, against, certain Republicans, and they have been the protesters are going in a car line, a line of protests from their cars, and then some of them are getting out and placing black body bags in front of the office or the White House or the home of a leader who wants to normalize and not have people wear masks or not be socially distant. And, they've had signs like Trump lies, people die. And then they place all those kind of fake body bags as a symbolic message of how many people are dying from the decisions made by elected officials. So there are protests. They've taken a different form. There's not as many because of the logistical, situation and the restrictions, but the protests will go on. And now, thank God, we have at least the internet during this terrible pandemic so that people can be educated and they can still protest this way. And then they can do what Mother Jones said, which is don't agonize, organize. Mm-hmm. And that's what I believe. People will be empowered. And the most important act of empowerment, you know what that is? Vote in November. That is the most important thing everyone can do, must do if they are an eligible adult, eligible to vote. Hopefully they registered or will register and vote by mail or however you can do it. We always say this next presidential election is the most important. But really, this is the most important. And I mean, 4 years ago when Trump came in, I said, I hope I live through the next 4 years because I felt it was life and death with him in charge, and more likely
it has turned into that.
I had no idea there'd be a pandemic, and sure enough, now people have died because of decisions which were not made by the White House, failed to be made, should have been made when they had the information and could have made it. There's actually a study out today, I understand, from Columbia University, that if the White House had acted like 1 week earlier, even, that 30,000 people might not have died. So this is a dangerous time. But everybody, Billy said, some of you feel helpless. Don't feel helpless. Don't feel hopeless. Take your power back. And make sure that no matter what happens, you vote in November.
And Billy, the other thing to underscore that, while we're busy watching as we should, the pandemic, and we're talking about things that Trump says or doesn't say, his administration and his agenda is very easily and successfully replacing judges on levels of our judicial system on all across America and every single level, which will have a generational effect on cases that go forward that make law, that will make law for decades, right? So we don't talk about that a lot because it's complicated. It's hard enough to tell somebody what a local court is and a federal court and the Supreme Court. So, when you're voting for president, you're not just voting for the person, you're voting for what you hope they will do. I get angry at people who don't vote because they say, well, that person doesn't match my agenda 100%. When I'm voting for like a national leader, if it's 40%, I'm usually pretty good with it, right? Because you're never going to get somebody who agrees with you 100%. So just go directionally. Is this person directionally where I'm going? Good, I'll take that. So, and the Trump administration and the Republicans have been busy rolling back voting rights for years, and now they're doing it even more quickly. And the pandemic is giving them an excuse to make sure that people can't get to the polls. So,
right.
I don't really care that much. I'm not much of a marcher. I don't like to go outside. I don't like to find a bathroom. I don't like to look for water. I don't want to make a sign. But I am a big believer in voting and getting out to vote and getting people to vote. So if you're feeling helpless, you're not. If you're feeling hopeless, you're not. You have the power to vote. You just got to make sure you register, you show up, and you get other people to go with you.
So you made a really important point about the judges.
Yes, please.
And this is so important in my legal profession and my law firm and my practice. And yes, so many of us love. I'm in awe of United States Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, 87 years old. Unbelievable how she's fought off so many challenges. Physical challenges to her health and cancer and so many other things, and she still keeps going on and working out twice a week from the Supreme Court gym. God
more
bless.
than I'm doing.
I can one push up or pull up every day. You see that in her documentary. I love her. But anyway, no doubt if she, for any reason, she couldn't continue, Trump would appoint someone in a moment who would be completely diametrically opposed to everything that Justice Ginsburg stands for. So we wish her health and a long life. But the point is, whoever is the next president, hopefully she'll still be there and continue for decades, many years to come. But if there's any vacancy by any of the 9 Supreme Court justices, the next president will have an opportunity to, nominate someone who will then be confirmed by the United States Senate Judiciary Committee. The courts have such an impact on our lives. People don't realize it until they come to me with a case, and then I explain what the law is and what we can do, which is good, and what we can't do because of some of the legal decisions that have been made by some of these judges. You're right, Sue. He's packed the court, Trump.
Right.
I don't know, more than 100, I can't remember, federal court who are there for life.
Right.
And many of them are extreme right wing. Some of them, frankly, have been called incompetent.
I was going to say some of them shouldn't even be representing anyone, much less being a judge. And I don't mean from a point of view of politics or agenda. They actually are just bad jurists.
Well, I'm saying incompetent to be judges. Maybe they're okay as attorneys. I don't know. There's something special involved with being a judge. But in any event, this is a catastrophe that most people, you're right, Sue, don't even know about or don't pay attention to if they do and don't realize the impact on their life. So, and this is something Mitch McConnell, who said that Obama couldn't appoint somebody in an election year.
Right.
Because he, and no doubt, even though this is an election year, if there's a vacancy on the court or more than one, God forbid, McConnell, I think he's already said the rule will not apply this year. And rush to put some, Trump justices on the court. You all have the power not to make that happen.
Right.
Not only should you vote and vote by mail if necessary.
Well, that's what I want to ask you. So there have been, all of these states have been talking about the voting system in November and what will be available in terms of in-person voting, mail voting, etc. And Trump has really pushed back against mail-in ballots. Is there a chance that mail-in ballots will not be valid? Gloria, let me ask you.
I don't think so. And again, another example of his hypocrisy, because he's voted the last 2 elections by mail himself.
Right.
When challenged by reporters on that, he said, "Oh, well, I'm in the White House. I can't be in Florida, which is his new residence. Maybe he's upset with New York because they want to see his income taxes and have taken action to get it. In fact, that case is before the Supreme Court. But in any event, and will soon be decided. But also, and then before that, he made some other excuse about why in the prior election he also voted by mail. He says there's, fraud in mail, and there's no evidence of that.
Zero evidence.
Fraud in mail-in ballots, and and then he lies. He says Michigan, sent out mail-in ballots, which is not true. They sent applications to see if people would want to get a mail-in ballot.
And I got one in West Hollywood, as a matter of fact. Most responsible cities are reaching out to their citizens to make sure they have alternatives to
right.
vote.
And Billy, this is another example of where the states have the power, right? So this is an area where states can determine their own elections. It's, depending on how you look at it, a good thing or a bad thing. But, governors are making effort to make sure their people are safe when they vote. And, there's a lot of argument that the idea that you have to be sick or give an excuse to get a mail-in ballot is ridiculous, since most people know who they're voting for well in advance. There's not a heck of a lot of last minute mind changing, but this is where the governors and the state lawmakers have to lead to keep people safe and to make it easier for people to vote, because there's almost zero voter fraud statistically in this country. And every time the Republicans or Donald Trump talk about busloads of people who left Massachusetts went to New Hampshire to vote in the primary, didn't happen. No evidence that it happened. More people are turned away from the polls who can vote and should be able to vote than show up and vote illegally.
Gloria?
Yeah, and I think, is going to be an effort again by the Republican Party to try to suppress the vote and have people not have confidence in the vote. And so we have to fight against that. Is
there a chance that there will not be an election?
No, that's constitutionally mandated.
Gloria?
It has to happen. Yeah. But we want it to be an election, not a selection by another country, so to speak.
And not a coronation.
Yes, exactly. And, and we don't want people messing with our election. Maybe Trump is concerned that, it's easier, of course, to manipulate the result in the computer voting machines than it is with mail-in ballots.
Well, we know something about those machines.
Yeah, so I'm saying maybe that's the reason he doesn't want the mail-in ballots. I don't know, but he and Mitch McConnell apparently walking lockstep together on opposing that. So if they're opposing it, it's another reason why we should be for it, because they're concerned that perhaps people's voices and votes will be heard, will be counted, and that may not be good for him. Of course, we got 3 million more votes last time in the presidential election than he did. 10 million votes did not go to him. Because some went to other candidates and so forth. But the point is, the battleground states are really going to be important, as they always are. Michigan and Pennsylvania and some other states. And so we'll see what they do. Right now, public sentiment is against Trump, and he's trying to get things back to normal, including the economy, I think, because he thinks that's going to help him win. But look, what's important is the health of everybody. Until we have health and safety regulations, it's going to be the virus who wins, and the economy will continue to lose. We can't let that happen.
I have a question before we let Sue go, because I know, sorry, Sue, I've kept you longer than I promised. I know.
You'll get my invoice. You'll get my invoice.
Take it out of my February.
I'll take it out of your pay.
You know, Gloria and I had talked earlier about employers during the coronavirus. And, you know, I come from a line of employers and employees. So one of my biggest issues is I can see both sides, and I recognize the challenge for employers to reopen while they need to reopen if they want to stay alive. And I understand employees who don't want to be at risk but need money or they'll die. So, Sue, let me start with you. Do you see some sort of answer to all of this mess?
Well, again, there would be if we had some federal leadership, right? So you also have an administration that's gutting worker protection rules and saying to corporations and businesses, we trust you about a million things. We trust that you won't pollute. We trust that you won't price gouge. We trust that you won't do this. And we know from history, they can't trust people, right? That's why Gloria makes so much money, because you can't trust people. So we've already set the standard from the federal government that they're going to rely on businesses to make decisions. Now, that may work out okay for some big companies, but it also doesn't help little mom and pop stores to know what they should and shouldn't do, and puts them in a bind where they're afraid. They might have the best intentions, but are they going to invest in moving their booths and then find out that they didn't move their booths far enough apart, or someone sues them because they didn't follow some guideline that hasn't been set out, you know, clearly for them to follow? Right. So I just feel that we are adrift. Just without any, the best intentioned business owners and people who want to return to work in a safe environment are left without a lot of guidance. And I think, you know, to our earlier points, they need to call their local lawmakers, their local mayors and governors, and demand clear guidance on how they can reopen safely for their employees, for their customers, and also so that we can get the economy going. Because if we had better leadership, we would be in a better spot right now.
Gloria, in terms of legally, how does this impact people?
Well, there's so many legal issues that have arisen for employees on account of the employment issues that have resulted from COVID-19. And I welcome everybody, invite everyone to come to my webpage, GloriaAllred.com, because during this COVID-19 period, some of my partners and associates from my law firm and myself have been doing some videos on employee rights and what can happen to you, what you should know about your rights in this COVID-19 crisis. In other words, what you can do if you think that an employer is discriminating against you, you know, laying you off when they shouldn't have, and using it as a pretext for sexual harassment, sexual, whatever it is. There are many rights, and we definitely hope that everyone will come and view that and learn what their rights are, and they can decide if they want to assert them or not, because, you know, employers can't violate rights, you know, during this crisis. They have to have a basis, and often they don't.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you for staying with us so long.
It's been great to see. I mean, what else am I going to do, Billy? I mean, really? I mean,
I don't know.
I get to meet Gloria Allred. I get to hang out with you again. I look busy. You know, people aren't bothering me at home. I'm working.
All right. Well, get back to work. Thank you. Thank you, Sue, for joining us.
Good to see you. Nice to meet you, Gloria.
Banter with you. It's always great to be with intelligent, stimulating people.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Conversation. Thank you.
Gloria, so now let's go back to you, because when I was researching your career, what I really found fascinating, we had talked briefly about your rape. And first off, I didn't know about it. And I'm wondering how much of your personal experience has fueled your drive to get justice for other people. Does one have to be a victim to be an effective advocate?
No, but I think most people are at some point in their life, maybe more than one point, victims of something that they feel is unfair. When I became a victim of that, I was Gloria who? I mean, it was in my 20s,
Right.
and I wasn't a lawyer, and nobody had heard of me except my family and a few friends, and maybe where I was going to school. So, I didn't feel that I had any power. I didn't feel that I had any rights, and I didn't feel if I knew that I had any rights, I wouldn't have known where to go to assert them or felt like I couldn't afford it. Even though now I might point out that I represent lots of rape victims, and we're always happy to have free consultations. That's not a problem. But the point is, life experience is a very big factor in what we believe, who we become, what we fight for, and how we understand others. And so, yes, it's the old saying, life is what's happening while you're planning other things. That was not in my script for what happened, but I did learn from it. It's made me more empathetic. And now I've represented, literally, there is not a day, Billy, that goes by where I'm not getting calls and emails from rape victims, sexual assault victims, adult victims of child sexual abuse. And we fight for those because now victims have more rights, and we're able to work not only in the criminal justice system to help sometimes in the criminal justice system, but to also help them to get settlements, which are going to help them to go on with their life, to go on to get the medical care they need, the therapy, to help them, get reimbursement for their pain and suffering, for any time they've lost, wages they've lost from work. And more importantly, it's taken them from being on the defensive, which is what you are if you're a victim of rape, sexual assault, or sexual abuse. You're on the offensive now. You're going after the person who has hurt you, the predator, and you are making him pay for it, literally, the consequences. They have to pay for it. And the law now has changed so much that in so many places, in so many states, you have sometimes decades can go by and you've never done anything against that predator. Now you can.
Yeah, the laws have changed.
And it's amazing and wonderful. And we do this in many different states and make them accountable, not just going after rock stars and other people in the entertainment industry.
I don't think what I learned is that is not, those high profile cases are not the bulk of your cases. They may get they're not the bulk of your cases. There are the little people. And one quote you said, and maybe it comes from your experience, you were talking about your personal experiences, and I don't remember if it was the marriage issue, but you said, I wish I had a Gloria Allred.
Exactly.
And I think that you have filled a niche for a need that many people, and I hasten to not say women, I think people needed a Gloria Allred.
Well, I did say that when I was going through a divorce, and then I realized, wait, I am Gloria Allred. And for me, I had become the person that I wanted to be. All right. And the saying in the women's movement, become the person you wanted to marry. If you want somebody in your life who is going to protect you, learn how to protect yourself. If you want someone who has a good sense of humor, develop that in yourself. If you want to marry a lawyer, become a lawyer if you can. If you want to marry a doctor, we try to become a doctor. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But the point is, become the person that you wanted to marry. And yes, my job is not just to fight for people, but to help to empower them so that they can then, when they win justice, and everybody, by the way, has the strength and courage to win more justice than they ever realized. And I want them to know that. And when they do, then they can pass it on. Each one empowers another one, empowers another person in their life, family, friends, coworkers. And, they become transformed through that empowerment, knowing that they have fought back, they have won. And so we've done that through confidential settlements that nobody will ever know about except our clients and the other party. And they've been able to go on their life because there are some people who want privacy. They don't want it out there on the internet or in the press, and they're entitled to have their privacy and also be able to make the other side pay for the wrong against them. And we've gone against priests and ministers and rabbis and teachers and coaches and
doctors, even
businesses and doctors. We have a case now on behalf of 70 women, 70 former students, some of them are still students at USC, against Dr. George Tyndall, whom our clients allege sexually abused them. And we're suing USC, we're suing Dr. Tyndall.
Wow.
That, he was the OBGYN there. So this is, people in power, everybody's had somebody in power in their own life, whether they're parents, step-parents, friends of the family who sexually abuse the children, somebody. And now the victim is saying, I'm taking my power. I'm going to use power. I'm going to equalize the power that he had or she had over me, and I'm going to make them accountable. It's a beautiful thing. I'm inspired by my clients and the courage they show as we take them through the process and help them to understand how to make this happen to get a positive result. And some people will do it, a lot of people confidentially. And then there are some people that, will file lawsuits for, like we did with Ms. Khan, winning the $58 million plus for her, when, if a case is not resolved without a lawsuit.
What is the downside for you? Because as we saw in the documentary, and you speak really openly that you don't want a personal life, you've really dedicated yourself. And why a personal life? I mean, a relationship. You've had your relationships, you've had your daughter, and you really have dedicated yourself to your work and your passion. Can you have it all? Is it possible?
Can I have it all? No, and no woman can, and no man can, and no man can. So, it's so funny because I did an interview at the beginning of this COVID-19 remotely from my kitchen because I was at home. And I was thinking, for 44 years, I've fought to get women out of the kitchen, so to speak. And now here I am back in the kitchen. The kitchen is a great place to be. I'm spending more time in it now than I have, I think, in the last 40 years put together. No, we want women to enjoy their kitchens, but also to have other opportunities if they want them to, work professionally and be judged on the merits and not based on the gender. So, it's, we just have to keep on keeping on is all I can say.
There was, I want to talk about the Cosby case briefly, because there was a really chilling, I want to say, cover of New York Magazine. And I'm going to show first the cover that people actually saw, which is frightening when you look at it. And then there was another picture inside where the women are spaced out. And it gives you an idea of the enormity of this case. Now, first, I have one issue, which is it fair to anyone, to the victim, to the perpetrator, to be judged in the arena of public opinion prior to a case actually going forward and evidence being revealed?
Yeah, and you see many of the victims who are on the cover. Many of them were my clients.
Yes.
And you hear them in my documentary, and you see them in my documentary, Seeing Allred, speaking about what they suffered. But you bring up an important point, and it has to do with the court of public opinion. Of course, by the way, some of them, my clients, were the majority of the prior bad act witnesses who were permitted to testify at Bill Cosby's criminal trial. And he was convicted of indecent aggravated sexual conduct in Pennsylvania, and he has been classified as a sexually violent predator, and he's still in prison, which is exactly where he should be. And I have,
despite his efforts to get out, we might add.
And part of the grounds for his appeal to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has to do with those other victims that I just mentioned being allowed to testify.
Yes.
I don't think he's going to be successful, but we'll have to wait and see what the court says in that regard. But back to your question, look, in the court of public opinion, there's no statute of limitations. There's no arbitrary time period during which a person must say something or can never say it after that. Whereas with certain cases, rape cases, for example, both in the criminal justice system and the civil justice system, there are statutes of limitations, arbitrary time periods during which a victim must assert her rights or never can have the case prosecuted or can never have the case, they can have it filed in a civil lawsuit, but they won't be permitted to proceed because the court will dismiss it if the defendant asserts that it's too late, statute of limitations. But that's not true in the court of public opinion, which is the Wild West. People can say and do whatever they want. People have said whatever they want. Now, it doesn't mean you can't be sued for what you say.
Exactly.
You accuse someone of a crime, that person might sue you. That's not what Bill Cosby did.
No.
Those people who made allegations against him, he filed one case against Beverly Johnson. I think that case then ended up and not continuing. And is it fair? I mean, people have a right to have their voice as a victim. A lot of them have had this bottled up inside of them for so many years. I'm sure that many people watching your show, Billy, some of them have been abused, never told anybody. It's a secret that's been tearing them apart. And I say, take that secret that, you've turned the rage that you feel about it inward. And for some of you, it's caused you drug addiction, it's caused alcoholism, it's caused anorexia, it's caused depression, it's caused all kinds
suicide.
of problems and suicide. Don't try to tranquilize yourself out of it. I'm not a doctor, I'm not prescribing, but that's my view. Take that rage, feel it, turn it outward into positive, constructive action to help win change. Many of my clients who were victims went to the state legislatures and worked with me to change the law, to end the statute of limitations, for example, for criminal prosecution of rape in a number of states, or lengthen the number of years in which that could happen. And we were successful, and they felt empowered. And that, it's that kind of thing. Others, you can seek a confidential settlement. You might still be able to file a lawsuit. There are actions you can take. And so don't try to just suppress the rage. Try to, do it in a constructive way, turn it outward as a form of energy to propel you forward to positive change. You will feel so much better, and you will know you made an impact to help others. So that's what I suggest. But of course,
consult
an attorney, because you don't want to end up getting sued for death.
Right. But now I'm curious about the other side, because there was really interesting footage in your documentary, seeing Allred. There was Bill Cosby was still trying to work at the time that this case was going on, and he had done a performance, and there were picketers and protesters. Does he have the right to work? And do the people who think he's funny, are they allowed to go while a case is being done?
By the way, interesting backstory on that.
Please.
Yes, in Seeing Allred on Netflix, you see me protesting outside, and I think it was Atlanta, Bill Cosby's Far From Finished tour. Fortunately, he is finished right now. But and then so after that, and it didn't show this, somebody gave me a ticket to go inside and see the show. So I decided, okay, you know what? I'll go in. So they give me a Ticketmaster ticket. I go in. I want to see what he says. I knew there were going to be other protesters trying to disrupt the show, but I wasn't intending to disrupt it. I just wanted to see what was happening. But then they stopped me from going in. That is, people from the theater, from the Cobb Energy Center. And then they sent me to a side door and said, you need to go in there. And when I went in there, there were people, police there. And they said, Ms. Allred, I'm sorry, you can't come in. You're on a list. I said, well, what have I done? They said, well, you're on a list. Essentially, I found out it was from the Cosby people that said I couldn't come in. Well, I ended up suing them.
Good for you.
I'd be arrested if I tried to come in. It would be trespassing. So I sued them, and I might add that I was very successful. And the reason I sued them was not just because I couldn't go in. It's because we cannot allow celebrities, performers, to decide who can come in to see their show if they have a ticket, bought a ticket, or been gifted a ticket.
However you have it, right?
Yes, because of the content of that, theater goers' views,
Right.
liking the celebrity, not liking the celebrity, what they've said, what they've done. That's not how it works. And government, and that was a government funded, at least in part, theater complex,
right,
and can't have them involved in this type of, I'm going to call it censorship, free speech restriction. And I was successful with that.
And I would bet, now I'm going to use my telepathy. My hunch is if Cosby, who had not been found guilty of anything at that point, if he were barred from renting a theater like anyone else and performing, you would probably uphold his rights to being able to perform. Is that true?
Well, I mean, I'm
not in this case.
I wouldn't be helping him, but obviously people, you know, if they have a contract to perform, they should be able to perform unless there's, you know, what we call force majeure, act of God or something, reason why they can't. But, you know, I'm just concerned about, look,
freedom all around.
Point, Billy, and I say this in my book, Fight Back and Win, my 30-year fight against injustice. And I think I say it in the film as well. Nobody has ever given women and minorities any rights up to and through today, and they won't in the future.
Right.
The only way we have rights is if we fight for them and win them. So this year is the 100th anniversary of women's winning the right to vote, August 26, 2020. And I hate it when people say, oh, well, women were given the right to vote in the United States 100 years ago. Wrong. Nobody ever gave us the right to vote. We had a fight from 1848 to 1920, 72 years to win the right to vote. We won it. Now we are fighting to win the Equal Rights Amendment passage of the ERA addition to the United States Constitution. We've been fighting since 1923 to win the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment of the Constitution.
And aren't we closer now? Didn't I hear that some states have now started ratifying? We're very close.
38 states have, but there's going to have to be a legal battle and also political act in Congress because there was a deadline, and then the anti-Equal Rights Amendment folks are saying, well, it's not valid if states have ratified after the deadline. By the way, there was a, Mrs. America on, I guess it was FX, about Phyllis Schlafly.
Oh, yes.
I debated Phyllis Schlafly. She mentions me in one of her writings, I think in her book. I was one of the leading proponents of the ERA back when, that was a very major issue for people in the 70s and 80s. So all I can say is we have to keep fighting for our rights. Nobody ever gave gay, lesbian, people with AIDS, HIV, any rights at all until we stood up and fought for them and insisted upon them and said, we are equal. We deserve respect. We deserve equal rights and protection under the law. And we are not going to stop until we have it. That's how we won it. That's how we won it in the Supreme Court of the United States. That's how we won it elsewhere. And we are going to have to continue that battle now more than ever.
It's funny, you mentioned now we've talked about women's rights, we've talked about business, sexual abuse. Let's just talk, we'll wrap up with gay rights, because I did not realize you had been involved with gay rights and gay marriage for decades before people really knew about it. And I found a Donahue show of you with Bob Paris and Rod Jackson, who people may remember at the time were suing for the right to be able to get married because they felt that it was arbitrary to list a man and a woman as the only ones that could marry. And you were there. And it seems to me that you were really ahead of the curve, and your arguments there were the same arguments that came up 20, 30 years later.
Exactly. And you know what? We were the first in the state of California to announce that I went to the Beverly Hills courthouse with my clients, Robin Tyler and Diane Olson, and to get, they wanted to get a marriage license and Freedom to Marry Week years ago. And we knew they were going to be denied, but they were friends. They asked me to go with them. And you see this in the film. And then we fought for, I think, 8 years for the right to marry, marriage equality for individuals who wish to marry in California, who were same-sex couples. we won the right to marry. We were there at the Supreme Court. My partner argued before the Supreme Court. And because we were the first to announce in California and also to announce in Los Angeles County that we were going to fight for the right to marry, and did file the lawsuit for the right to marry and litigate it, our clients, when we won that right to marry in California, Robin and Diane were allowed to marry the day before everyone else was allowed in LA County. So we are so proud of them. Diane is now deceased, but she's now part of history or herstory. And so we also fought for Reverend Troy Perry and his significant other, whom we represented, Philip DeBleek. And we were very proud to represent them. Of course, Reverend Perry was the founder of the Metropolitan Community Church, which is a worldwide church, which was founded to make sure that persons who are gay and lesbian and transgender would have a home and be able to worship as well.
Now mentioning transgenders, so you had sued the Miss Universe. Well, you were involved in the Miss Universe competition against Trump, because there was a transgender contestant. Now, let's be very clear. There are murky issues about transgender people competing in athletic things, which we can argue that point another time, but there are advantages to genetically being a man or a woman. In a competition, which is ostensibly a beauty pageant, it is based on how you look. And if you qualified and you won and somebody finds out you're a transgender, what should that matter?
Let me just say that I'm glad you mentioned that case. That was, I think, back in 2012.
It's a long time ago.
Jenny Talakova, my client, had always wanted to be in the Miss Universe, Miss Canada pageant. And finally, she qualified. She was eligible and accepted into it. And someone then anonymously contacted the pageant and said she was born with a male anatomy, and Trump owned the Miss Universe pageant at the time, and they kicked her out. She contacted me, flew down to Los Angeles. I had a standing room only press conference with her, and I called on Mr. Trump to put her back in. And definitely I was ready to sue him if he did not. I said something to the effect of, and by the way, you can see this on YouTube, Mr. Trump, we don't care what your anatomy was when you were born, and you shouldn't care what her anatomy was when she was born. And this is discrimination against someone because they're transgender by a business, and you cannot discriminate under the law. Put her back in. Well, apparently, I think it was the next day or very shortly after, he was on TMZ with Harvey Levin. And Harvey asked him what he thought about what I'd said. And by this time, I think Trump was boiling. He said something about, Gloria would love to see what's under my pants. And
sure you would.
Yeah. And then I came back, I think it was the next day, and I said, Mr. Trump, I don't have a magnifying glass strong enough to see something that small. So he really went, off the charts after that. Then Barbara Walters got involved in 2020 and so forth. Anyway, bottom line is he put her back in to the pageant, which made her very happy. Of course, he said, it wasn't because of Gloria, right?
But it did set a precedent, which exists to this day.
We had that press conference, yeah. And so, ultimately, someone has won as well.
Yes.
So, yes, it was a battle. As I said, we had a fight for that. And my client was extremely brave, very beautiful. And that was, I actually knew Mr. Trump before that. And then it was very funny because, he trashed me during that whole battle, which I don't care about, the trashing. But then, after it was all over, a couple of years later, I saw him at Fox News. We both happened to be there talking about something completely different. He walked into the green room. He said, Gloria, I heard you were here. I have to tell you something, and your client something. I had a different client with me about something completely different. He walks up to my client and says, You have the best. I just want you to know you have the best attorney you could ever have. This woman is fearless. She is relentless. She will never give up, until she wins you the justice that she thinks that you deserve. So never, ever fire her because you will never get anyone better. Well, I was astounded. I said, because it was so completely different than the public trashing. And I said, well, thank you very much, Mr. Trump. And then he left. And then, of course, years later, now he's president of the United States. Who would have known? But anyway,
and you are you representing any of the women against Mr. Trump?
Well, the answer is yes and no. Not in a lawsuit, but I have represented many women who've spoken out against him. I did, and I still, have strong feelings about how Mr. Trump has, what he has done to women, and that he should not be president of the United States.
Well, when we're wrapping up, but I want to say that one of the things I got out of seeing Allred on Netflix, go watch it because it's really fascinating, is that I did not realize exactly what your role was in a lot of cases. And what really came out, we never even got to O.J. Simpson, but what really came out, and people at home, you should understand something. If you are the victim of a crime and attorney general or somebody from the government is prosecuting this, they are representing the state. They are not representing you as a family member or a victim. And Gloria was brought into that case primarily to remind people of who the victim was and to speak out for them, to keep, because a defense attorney has that role, but somebody from the state is not going to do that for you. And what I think is wonderful is you've used your platform not only for individual people to get their rights, but also rehabilitate the image of the victim, because people do forget about them.
Yes, a voice for victims, and also rights for victims. You're right, the prosecutor, the district attorney, or the U.S. attorney does not represent the victim. The district attorney or the U.S. attorney represents the people. In case of a district attorney, the people of the state of California or New York or Massachusetts or wherever it is. And that means that whatever you tell a district attorney is not confidential. Mm-hmm. Whatever you would tell me as a private attorney, which every victim has a right to have, even in a criminal case, but most don't, is confidential. I can't disclose it to anyone. I wouldn't disclose it to anyone without permission of my client. And that's my ethical duty. So there are differences, and there are many differences in that. And yes, I mean, so for example, in the Harvey Weinstein case that we just talked about earlier, mm-hmm. I represented the victim, one of the two victims in the criminal case in New York, and two other clients who, in a way, are also victims, but were not classified as victims in that case. Now, by the way, Harvey Weinstein, there's a criminal case filed against him in Los Angeles, which I believe you will hear more about later this year. I do represent one of the victims in that Los Angeles prosecution, and I believe, and they are trying to extradite Mr. Weinstein from New York to LA for that, and hopefully that will happen within the next few months. And then the case can get rolling again in Los Angeles, because even though he's been sentenced to 23 years in New York, he'll be appealing that. So we need to go ahead with the LA prosecution. And so, yes, because I think often victims feel very alone, and, they're going to take a real grilling on the stand. So they're very courageous to take the witness stand. And it helps to have somebody, where they can have a confidential conversation with a lawyer. That happens to be me. In many cases, and and know they're not alone in this, in the sense that they can understand, their rights and responsibilities as a witness in a criminal case. So, and what's happening in the criminal justice system. So that's very important. And yes, and often prosecutors are not allowed to speak out during the trial. Right. Their job is to work in the interest of justice, and so. The defense can generally say whatever they want. The prosecution can't. I, as a private attorney, can say whatever I want. The Weinstein people tried to gag me. in this case.
Good luck trying.
We were unsuccessful. The defense attorneys tried to gag me in the famous People versus Scott Peterson case years ago, where I represented Amber Fry, the key prosecution witness. And by the way, the California Supreme Court is going to hear arguments in, I don't know, something like 10 days.
Oh, wow.
In the Scott Peterson appeal from his sentence. He's in prison for killing his wife, Lacey, in the unborn fetus. So, they were unsuccessful, gagging me there. Why are people trying to silence me all the time? Why am
I think we go back right to the beginning. I think people are really afraid of you. First off, I think people have learned today. Number one, you're fearless. Number two, you are tenacious and in the best sense of the word. But I think also number three, people should know that you're really funny. You're great at a dinner. I mean, sitting next to you is a lot of fun. And number four, you're also very emotional and demonstrative. If you look at, and let's show the thing, Seeing Allred, go see it on Netflix. You're very huggy with your clients, and you're very affectionate. I know you as a very affectionate person. I think people don't realize you can be determined and tough and also still affectionate.
Yes, I am. Of course, I always have to ask because I want to make sure that I don't create my space without their consent, and that's what everybody should do. And I tell children that, nobody gets to hug you or kiss you. They should, unless they ask you first, and you say that's okay. And not in your private areas, but you have to. Even if you're 4 years old or 5 years old, they have to ask permission. It's okay for you to say no, thank you.
Right.
But in any event. I do care a lot about my clients. I'm extremely protective, and I want the best for them, and my clients know that. I was also a radio talk show host for 14 years on the
Yes,
radio.
you were.
And I had a lot of people say, "God, we didn't know you had such a great sense of humor, Gloria." They heard it on the radio. You know what? I love to laugh. I love to hear other people and their sense of humor. And share it. You have to be able to laugh at yourself and also laugh at other people. Laughing at yourself, of course, is something President Trump doesn't know how to do. Usually people who are secure within themselves do know how to do that. Okay. And if I'm going to give it, I have to be able to take it.
Well, nobody takes it more than you. I just want to thank you so much for doing the show. First off, I know you, but I like the fact that the people watching will get to know you just a little bit more as a person.
Thank you so much. I wish you and all your viewers courage and strength throughout this pandemic, good health, and be safe, and continue to fight for your rights, fight back, and win.
Thanks, Glo. Have a great Memorial Day weekend. I'll see you soon, I hope.
Thank you so much. I'd like that, Billy.
Okay, bye, honey. Guys, this was Billy Masters Live. Yeah, I know, long. What am I going to do? It's Gloria Allred. I love her. I could talk to her forever. We will be with you Tuesdays, Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. And just remember, have a great holiday weekend. Try to do something for yourself. Get out, wear a mask, enjoy the weather if you can. And just remember, if we're here, we're live.